We've already mentioned a connection in the Sermon on the Mount between the kingdom that is in heaven, or the kingdom that is of heaven, and our everyday life that plays out on earth. We've actually skipped a portion you may have noticed in the sermon. It's chapter 5, verses 13 all the way through 16. We see this interplay between heaven and earth that is there. It comes out of the Beatitudes where Jesus says, "Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward that is in heaven." But the very next verse, verse 13, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." And again in verse 14, he says, "You are the light of the world." We see this interplay that takes place as Jesus says, you are going to live out this kingdom in a way that is going to be transformative, like salt that changes the flavor or preserves whatever it is that it is a part of. Or you're going to be like light. It transforms the landscape. It's visible. You really don't hide it. There's no use in hiding it. And then at the very end, Jesus comes back and says this, in the same way, "Let your light shine before others so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Notice the earth-heaven connection. You're going to live this kingdom of heaven out on earth like salt and like light so that others can see your good works. Well, it's out of this that Jesus talks, our last lesson, about his connection with the Old Testament, the law and the prophets, and how this kingdom is to be something that is lived out internally. This righteousness is given to us by the King, but we reflect it, we live it out in our own lives. We come to our primary passage, our primary text for today, and it's in chapter 6. And I want you to see this connection. Chapter 6, verse 1 starts out with this: "Beware of practicing your righteousness." Notice the righteousness connection to what we just finished with in chapter 5. "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them." Now wait a second, Jesus. I mean, you almost want to go back to that other passage again in chapter 5 and go, wait, you just said, "So let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works." And now you're saying, beware of practicing them in front of other people. What do you mean, Jesus? Well, it really comes down to this theme that I want to talk about, this theme of what is our motive, or what is the reward that we have in the kingdom. Because if you put these two texts side by side, you recognize this: "Let your light shine before others so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Now put that next to Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them." Oh, reward and motivation become these themes that we want to talk about today. What motivates us? It's a heart question as well. Why do we live the way that we do? Why do we live out this kingdom of heaven on earth? What is this heartbeat that's behind it? He goes on to say, if you live this way, practice your righteousness in order to be seen by people, you're not going to have a reward by your Father who is in heaven. In fact, what he's going to go on and argue is that you'll just get whatever reward you have here on earth, and that's it. Well, like typical rabbinic teaching, Jesus teaches us this general principle and then will give us specifics. He'll tease it out in 3 examples or 3 tests. And these 3 tests would be common ways that the people would describe the Pharisees as having righteousness, these acts of righteousness, these practices of righteousness. He's going to talk about the way that we give, the way that we pray, and the way that we fast. And again, the implications of this general principle can be played out in other venues as well, other spheres of life as well. But there's a definite contrast to the Pharisees that is taking place here. The contrast again is, let your good works be seen so they can glorify God who is in heaven, or that they can notice you and bring you glory. Again, whose kingdom are we building? Your kingdom come or mine? And so he plays this out in these 3 examples. The first one, chapter 6, verse 2. "Thus, when you give to the needy." Now, we almost hear the echo, right, of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Why? Because they're going to be ready to receive the kingdom, because they know that they need what God has to offer. They're looking for a benefactor. They're bankrupt on their own. They have no other options. That's these people. And we're called to give, really, on behalf of God to other people. But he gets to the heart of this, the motive of this, the nature of the reward. When you give to the needy, don't sound a trumpet in front of you. My 12-year-old daughter is learning to play the trumpet right now. I know how loud this can be. It's an announcement. Something is about to happen here. Don't sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do. The hypocrites in the synagogues and in the streets. The hypocrites that do this so that they might be, look what he says, praised by others. This word hypocrites, we have often said about it, it's someone who says something and does another, right? So it's a preacher who preaches one way and preaches maybe to not commit adultery and then goes out and has an affair, right? So hypocritical. But I think if we're going to accurately paint the picture Jesus is painting, it's more this, someone who does something and is something completely different on the inside. That's the nature of these hypocrites. They practice this act of righteousness of giving alms to the poor, but it's really just that. It's an act on the outside. Really on the inside, it's really giving to get. They're giving to receive the praise of people. They're giving to receive recognition from people and status from people. They're giving to elevate themselves and build their own kingdom. And Jesus goes, that's not my kingdom. And if that's the reward you're living for, that's all you're going to get. Well, he uses a second example in verse 5. As he goes on, he says, and when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites either. They love to stand and pray in the synagogues. They love to stand and pray on the street corners. They do it that they might be seen by others. But I tell you, surely they've seen their reward. They've received it. And like those who are giving, those who are praying use it as a platform, an outside opportunity for others to notice them. The third example we could see as well, the connection, and that is that of fasting. When you fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites. They disfigure their faces. They complain about how they're feeling and how their hunger is affecting them. They do this, however, so that they might be seen by others. And again, Jesus says, truly I tell you, they have received their reward. I want to tell you that this sermon teaches us this truth. If you are living out the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, you're living it out for a reward that is greater than what this world has to offer. Greater than a platform, greater than the applause of men, greater than money, greater than status, greater than our own kingdom. And all three of these examples, Jesus teaches us how to live with this heart that is in us from Jesus. So going back to the first example, he says this, truly I say to you, they've received their reward, but you, when you give to the needy, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Give in secret. And the Father sees it. The Father sees it, that which is done in secret, and he will reward you. Or going on to the next example, he says this. He talks about this prayer. You go into a room and shut the door, and you pray to your Father who is in secret, who sees what is done in secret, and he will reward you. Or going on to fasting. When you fast, anoint your head and wash your face so that your fasting may not be seen by others, but your Father who sees what is done in secret, he will reward you. This theme of reward and motivation. Now in our next session, we're going to talk about the nature of this reward or the treasures of the kingdom and how that's defined in the kingdom. But this becomes this litmus test for us. Why do we, in our own following of Jesus, why do we do some of the things that we do in the world around us? Is it motivated out of a deep sense of who God is and who we are in Jesus? And is it motivated out of this heartbeat of love for God, adoration for God? Is it motivated out of this heartbeat of love for other people? Or is it really, if we're honest when we look in the mirror, still a love for self? You see, Jesus, I think in this moment, calls all of us to look in the mirror, to be honest with ourselves and ask the question of our heart. That we will be salt and that we'll be light and that we'll transform the world around us. But we'll do it not to build our own kingdom, to build our own reputation, but we'll do it to build His kingdom and His name. It reminds me of a time when I was traveling on a trip through Kentucky, and we were actually studying church history. And we went to a small cemetery outside of a church, and this cemetery had been weathered and worn. Many of the headstones that were there, the names had actually eroded off of the surface, many of them broken and fallen down on the ground. But there was this prominent headstone off to the side, a famous leader. To be honest, I don't remember the name, but I do remember that the name was still there. The dates of death and birth were still vivid and still deeply etched in the stone, while everyone else's headstone around seemed to be kind of this fading memory. Here's the weird moment I had. I had to ask myself, am I okay with being a person whose name is forgotten so that other people can remember the name of Jesus? Am I okay that is a person who is okay with speaking and teaching and living and giving and serving? And all of these practices of living out the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, am I okay if all of these things only give glory to His name? That if He is the only one who's remembered, that He is the only one who's held up as prominent and esteemed. See, that's the heartbeat of the kingdom. It reminds me of when my kids come to me after work sometimes and they've created something for me. At times they'll come up to me and they'll be like, "Dad, look what we made you." And if it's Legos, I kind of have to do a, "What is that?" Or if it's a picture, I don't look at it and say, "Wow, you colored outside of the lines," or "Wow, I don't know what it is." What I'm doing in that moment is I'm recognizing my kids have brought something to me, and I'm recognizing the heartbeat behind that they have done this and they're presenting this to me out of love and affection. And they're saying, "Dad, we love you. Here's how we've responded to the love you have for us and the love we've had for you." That's the heartbeat of these practices of right living or righteousness, is they're out of a heartbeat of love and affection for God the Father, for Jesus and what He's done. And they're out of a heartbeat of love and affection for the people around us. They don't earn us anything. I mean, it's outside of the lines. It's something that God, I'm sure, goes, "That's really cute. Not sure what it is. That was a nice sermon. That was a great production you put." Those are all things that God looks at and goes, "I see in your heart. And I know that you've done this for me." And so what we want to do is notice these three examples and notice that ultimately God says, "I see you. I see what you're doing for me. I see how you're responding to what I've given you, the grace that I've given you. I see how you want to live in this childlike way of responding with giving love and affection and grace back, and I will reward that." Well, the next time we get together, we want to talk about more specifically the prayer that comes at the heart of this prayer that we call the Lord's Prayer. But as we wrap this particular session up, foreshadowing that, we want to again pray that prayer we've prayed throughout. Your kingdom come. God, this is not about my kingdom. This is about building your kingdom and helping other people see you more clearly by how we live as salt and how we live as light in this world.